Well, I feel like I should probably explain why I made a fan edit of Terminator 3. It was just about making Terminator 3 more of a proper follow-up to Terminator 2. And by that I just mean making it feel more like Terminator 2. The first movie was a horror film. It was like a horror sci-fi movie. And the second movie was an action film. When you do another sequel, you know, you're gonna take it up a notch in one direction or another. And they could have done more action, they could have done more horror. What they did was more jokes. The third one comes across more as a action comedy, which is weird because this is the one where the world ends. And I don't know why you would make the funniest movie in your franchise the one where the entire world gets destroyed at the end.
Sorry.
First thing was color grading. Terminator 2 had almost a blue tint over the whole thing, and I did a lot of work to make this movie match that without overdoing it. Second thing was fixing the Terminator vision, which I'll get to in a minute. It just wasn't right. And then there was taking out the overly campy jokes. A lot of the fans know exactly the ones that I'm talking about. And then there's just places where I felt I needed to add some music to make it more dramatic, or change or add some sounds. Another big deal was just making John Connor more relatable. I know that John Connor was kind of a douchebag in his first appearance in Terminator 2, but he was a kid, so that doesn't make him totally unrelatable. In this one, he's weirdly cocky, even though he's been through all of this horrible stuff, and his character arc needed some tightening up. And then throughout the movie, I tried to make it a little less overstated. And then everywhere else was just fixing straight up errors. I don't know why they got put in or left in, but we do what we can as editors. So, I mean, if you look at the second one, it's, in my memory, the whole thing just seems blue. But it's really just the night scenes, especially towards the end. It almost has just a blue filter dropped right on top of it. The day scenes are still pretty vibrant, but it does have a certain warmth to it. It's not just flat. But Terminator 3, the entire film, no matter what the scene is, it's pretty much the same light. You really can't tell much of a difference between being in a bunker and being in an RV. It's soft with some heavy shadows. So in order to get the whole movie looking right, I did 4 different basic color grading sets. Because they were so consistent with the lighting through the whole thing, I think that's what made it easy. It's a weird kind of thing that when you look at it initially, it doesn't look like maybe I even changed that much. It still looks pretty withdrawn, but when you turn off the effects, even though they were doing the nighttime thing, it looks like nighttime, but it just doesn't have that blue tint Terminator thing going on. Now that you look at it this way, it might even look a little too heavy, but really this is pretty standard, you know. Let's have a look at Terminator 2 again. Shit's blue. So here's the original, and then there's the filter. Just when you compare the night scenes, you can really see just how much more of a mood it creates. Bedroom scenes all kind of get pulled back into a more science fiction look, especially when there's science fiction elements on screen. This is a preset I created that I called Dark and Orange. This was just for any time I wanted to keep the blue tint, but wanted the high end to be more of an orange. And there's the original, and there's the filter. Just brought the blacks up a little bit and put that blue in there. That came in use for whenever there's fire or explosions. Yeah, pretty much fire and explosions, that's what that was for. Some of these scenes, the only color that isn't blue is where there is an explosion happening. So then there was the daytime scenes, and then there's the original, and then there's the filter, which just needed, I felt, to get a little bit subdued. It's okay to have all the colors there. Of course that's okay. It's still got enough of that vibrance that it's not looking completely dead. And really, I did them all in Magic Bullets, and they're all really simple filters. It's just a little bit of desaturation, and then a good bit of work on just fine-tuning the highs and the lows in the light, coloring them a little. But there was one scene where I really wanted to push the color correction much further, and that was this whole, what's essentially the climax of the film, or the kickoff for the climax of the film, that takes place in a military facility. And it's also the launch of Skynet, the main antagonist in the entire franchise. When Skynet goes online, there's this scene where all the computers turn off by themselves, and then they reboot, and the system's down, and then Terminator shows up, and robots just start blowing everything to hell. And again, everything looks the same as it does in every other scene. I did what I could to really make it look like the lights have gone off and backup lights are on just for when the computers go down. So this was just really using a bit of a crossfade here for when the lights go down. And it just stays this way for a second, just for a few seconds. And then when the computers come back up, I bring the lights back on, but I still keep it much darker than what was in the original. There's actually 2 layers of filters on this one. So yeah, there's your original. Here's where I put it. This just puts the whole thing in a different sphere of drama. It makes the entire scene much darker, which makes it scarier, which makes it more intense. That's filmmaking. Woohoo! And that became really tricky in this scene where I still wanted to keep it dark, but they're standing right next to a giant open window, but there's a lot of smoke in front of the window. So I could kind of excuse keeping it a little dim in there, even when a giant rocket comes flying. You know, this part was a lot of tiny tweaking. In the semi-dark blue room, a rocket comes in. This has all of its own color grading animation on it, like changing the color grading as it's going through, and the room gets completely filled with soot and smoke, which makes the whole scene much darker. And I just bring the light down for the whole scene after that. So another good example of some heavy tweaking is the scene where the small hunter-killer Terminator shows up. You know, originally it's, as per always, just completely flat. I think, you know, there's a little bit more light there. I did want to keep that explosion in there. Once this explosion happens, up here we fade in the bright daytime filter, so it's just lit up like daytime. And then that instantly cuts away to a neutral filter, which is down here, which is pretty close to the day filter. There's not a big difference between the two. It's very slight, but it's there. And then I just use a crossfade right here just to bring the blue back in as the rubble falls and the fire dissipates. Goes by quick. The absolute heaviest bunch of work was done here in the final set piece. This is supposed to be a big spooky scene. You don't know why they're there yet, and they think that it is the epicenter of Skynet's brain. But when they go in, there's nothing there but this really ancient computer access panel, which they open and it turns on. And again, the lighting and the coloring stays fairly, pretty much even through the whole thing. I added a red filter. I didn't just add a red filter. I worked on every shot. It starts off with them coming through the door, entering from, you know, the yellowish outside to the more red area. If you wanted to criticize it, you could find some holes in it, yeah. But the point is that as they go on, they end up in this room that's just completely red, and you don't know what's happening. And it's darker. I made it darker as well so that, you know, when he comes in here and he loads up his gun, you're just not sure if he's going to encounter bad guys or not, because the scene's written that way, it just doesn't look that way. And then when she opens the thing and these lights come on, I get rid of the red filter, everything goes blue. And then a helicopter crashes in, and it's got to be daytime lighting, but it's daytime lighting inside a bunker. So this was all, I had to really go at that stuff. I'll show you how everything looks. We'll do a little split screen. So here's the original, and then over there is obviously the change. You know, this whole part's just really tricky. It's a really bright scene because of all the fire, but it's still in the bunker. Of course, once they get further down, everything kind of gets simplified again. I might revisit this later and rework it some more. It's still not quite there. Yeah, in the second movie, it's still very high contrast. I mean, it looks cheap. It looks cheap and weird and like he's a slow old computer. In Terminator 3, they just put a red filter on what was essentially a colored scene.